Super glad to be here with you today on Flipside, and I'm your regular host, Oloije Oipopai. Today on Flipside, we will be looking at self-esteem. Yes, to do with justice to that with us is the person of Stephen Florencio. He is a clinical psychologist. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me on the program.
All right, we know so many persons have it within them and they feel they actually don't know a result of them having or being shy. To some persons, they feel like, okay, I don't know what's going on, but I just feel whenever someone talks to me, I feel intimidated. I can't really air out my views and all of that. So today we'll be asking our doctor, our clinical psychologist, first of all, what is self-esteem?
Yeah, okay, thank you very much for that. You know, as human beings, we tend to value ourselves and place some worth on ourselves. So self-esteem simply means how an individual views or thinks about himself, the value they place on themselves. So that's what self-esteem is. So when these values are now negative, when they tend to view themselves in a negative way, that's when we now see someone has maybe low self-esteem. But on a general note, when someone feels good about themselves, when they feel happy, when they feel themselves in more of positive light, positive statement about themselves, we see someone has a good self-esteem. And I believe everyone wants to have a good self-esteem. Nobody wants to have a low self-esteem. However, circumstances might predispose some individuals to experiencing low self-esteem in some cases. Yeah.
All right, so now you talked about some persons, they view themselves in a negative way,
Yeah.
and that results into low self-esteem. Now, why should one view his or herself in a negative way?
Okay. You see, as human beings we learn from our environment. So that an individual actually view themselves as in a negative way has to do with, we have to reflect back to their childhood. So do they experience any negative early childhood events? For example, neglect, children who suffer neglect and abuse while growing up, children who are unable to meet up with their parental expectation or even with their peer group expectation. You tend to notice that when they grow up, they might end up having this negative thought about themselves, because then what they experience is negative events that happen while growing up, which make them to now have a negative core belief about themselves. Just someone with a low self-esteem believing that, oh, I am worthless, I am not good enough. So someone who has that kind of negative thought pattern automatically might end up having a low self-esteem. Yeah. So, and in a situation like that, it's not as if it's a choice. You know, they learn it unconsciously while growing up because of the experiences they had. Yeah. So because of that, they develop this negative core beliefs about themselves. And you might be wondering, if someone actually developed these negative beliefs about themselves, how come were they able to grow up and still maybe even become great people in life? You find out that people who have low self-esteem, they set some rules and assumptions for themselves, in the sense that someone who believes that, oh, I'm worthless, believes that, oh, everything I do must be perfect. That is their way of actually protecting themselves so that they can function effectively well within their work environment or even within the society. However, just a little bump on the road, you now notice the dark core belief that has been dormant, that has not been visible, becomes obvious, and they are unable to cope with that situation. Then the core belief is that I'm worthless. Then the self-esteem becomes obvious that, oh, this individual has a very low self-esteem.
Okay, now in overview, is there a direct relationship, or does it have a direct negative effect on one's life?
Yes, it has a very direct negative effect on one's life because it impacts virtually every area of their life. Number one, you see them there, they tend to be self-criticized. They criticize themselves, they are self-critical. So someone who tends to self-criticize themselves, we find it difficult to even accept compliments. When they do something good, when they excel on some tasks, and you even give them compliment, they'll tell you, no, it's a luck. Maybe you see a student who has a low self-esteem and had an A in an exam, and you say, oh, good job. And they say, no, it's just a luck. Do you understand? So that's some of the signs, how it impacts their life. Also, relationship-wise, A lady that has low self-esteem might definitely suffer from domestic violence. We don't want to speak out. We don't want to run for her life. We believe that, oh, I deserve this. And also, a man with a low self-esteem could be a woman beater because he's always aggressive, feeling why is my wife achieving more? Why I'm not doing that? So it could impact their life. And also, for low self-esteem is a pointer to other major mental health conditions, such as depression, such as trauma. So it could be one of the symptoms that can be used to diagnose someone who has depression or someone who is suffering from a post-traumatic stress disorder. So on an overview, we can say that self-esteem is actually important and it affects every area of an individual's life.
Okay, now, what are those things that we can point that we say makes or brings out these things in individuals?
Okay, that brings out their self-esteem.
Yes.
Okay, like I said, I like to refer back to how we are growing up. That influences the self-esteem. Yeah. Abuse. Even though we have talked about the early childhood, how you raise your child, it goes a long way in determining whether your child is going to have a very high self-esteem or low self-esteem. Remember when you raise your child, when you always beat the child for doing something that is not good. You made a mistake, you beat the child. When you are beating the child, you are telling the child that you are bad. It's not necessarily that what he or she did is bad. So even if you believe that, you need to spank your child, if you are spanking the child, let the child know why you are spanking him or her. So that could actually influence a child to whether have a high self-esteem or low self-esteem. I also noticed that people who are not assertive enough tend to have low self-esteem. So the way you talk to people, the way you talk to your children matters a lot in building their communicative skills, in building the assertiveness in them. So if you don't communicate well with them, allow them to talk. Even if they do something bad, something that is not pleasing, give them room to talk. They'll say, oh, mommy, this is why I did this. So when you want to pass out the punishment, they are able to understand that this is the reason why you are punishing me. So apart from abuse that can make someone suffer low self-esteem, also medical condition. If you have someone who has maybe a medical condition and is not too proud or is stigmatizing himself first, might actually experience low self-esteem, not being able to relate well at work. Most especially in this part of the world, when people have mental health condition, they tend to suffer low self-esteem because of, maybe I'm not even good enough. Everybody will reject me. Everybody will abuse me. So that could actually affect an individual. Also in a work setting, a work environment that is very toxic, that there's no room for growth, there's no peace, can actually affect an employee's self-esteem. Then the staff start doubting his or her own ability. Did I even go to school? Was I taught well? So second-guessing their own ability because of the toxic work environment. So it's not just event that happened during the early childhood that can actually predispose someone to experience low self-esteem. Also event that happens even while we are in our adulthood. Daily activities can also affect someone's self-esteem. For a lady that suffers heartbreak, can definitely suffer from low self-esteem, asking herself or asking himself, is it my fault? Is it I'm not good enough? So those experiences can actually make someone to experience what we call low self-esteem. Also, apart from that, another reason why some people could actually experience factors that can cause low self-esteem is when you constantly think in a negative way. You are constantly, when you have a particular task, the first thought that comes to your mind is, oh, hope I won't fail. Why is it that, oh, I'm going to do this very well? I'm going to. So when you notice that you have this kind of thoughts, then it's a pointer that, oh, you might have a faulty core beliefs. Because your core beliefs is, I say it is like who you are, deep down. No, other people might be able to observe a little, but you yourself know what you think about yourself. These are conclusions you've come to make as a result of past things you've experienced in the past. So your core beliefs go a long way in determining whether you are going to have a low self-esteem or a high self-esteem. You understand? So that's one of the reasons that could actually prompt or influences one to actually experience a low self-esteem.
Okay, now someone watching us right now wants you to, do a definition of high self-esteem and low self-esteem in a layman term. in a time where everyone understands the different types. And also, some persons would be like, okay, being an extrovert and an introvert, is this channeled to either the high self-esteem or the low self-esteem?
Okay.
Now, first of the definition.
So let me put it a layman. When I talk about high self-esteem, this actually means an individual have a positive view, opinion of his or herself, values him or herself. Yeah. That's I.
Telling
yourself, I'm good, I can do this.
Yes, you find some parents, maybe the child says, oh, mommy, I can't do this thing. And the parents say, yes, you can do it. So is that also giving that child an advantage as having high self-esteem?
Yes, what you are doing then is that you are putting it in their vocabulary that, oh, there's nothing impossible you can't do. So they have a very good positive opinion about themselves. Why for the low self-esteem? They have a very negative opinion, views about themselves. They don't value themselves. They don't place too much value on their words. So they have very low. They believe that, oh, I'm not good enough. I'm worthless. They use negative words to describe themselves. Not necessarily that other people use it to describe them. They use those words to describe themselves. That is how they see themselves in the mirror. So that's for low self-esteem. So the other question is
the introvert and the extrovert.
Okay. So most times on the abstract, we want to believe that someone who is an extrovert must have a very high self-esteem, while someone who is an introvert must have a very low self-esteem. But it's not totally the case, because someone who is even an extrovert might actually be an extrovert because he or she has low self-esteem. And one way to actually cover up for the low self-esteem is to be out there. You understand? So your personality goes, whether being an extrovert or an introvert, only goes a little in determining whether you have have a high self-esteem or a low self-esteem. So it doesn't necessarily dictate that, oh, everybody that has that's an introvert has a very low self-esteem. No, it doesn't. So that some people who are introverts also have very low self-esteem. No, it doesn't go that way. It's not just black and white. So you might be an introvert and you have a very good self-esteem. You might be an extrovert and have a very good self-esteem. You might still be an extrovert and have a very low self-esteem. You might be an introvert and you still have a very low self-esteem.
Okay. Now, you made mention of parents contributing. So are they the #1 contributing factor to low self-esteem?
Yeah, I would say yes. And this is because while the child is growing up, when they are still in the formative years, still learning things from the environment, still gathering up who they are, who they want to be, they learn more from the parents, even from the school. So the child goes, before the child goes to school, at home with the parents. So the way you talk to your child, if you talk to your child like a slave, he will grow up to behave like a slave. If you talk to your child like a king, he's going to grow up to behave like a king. So the parents plays a significant role. Also, the school, the teacher, plays a significant role, because academic success depends on how well the teacher is able to teach the students very well. So I can't imagine sending my children to a school whereby if they didn't do too well in an exam and the teacher decides to, you failed, you've done this, you've done that. No. Even the way the educational system is built in Nigeria is like, if you should mistakenly fail, there's no support system. That's why you see some students, after writing maybe WAEC or JAM, or even some of the graduate students committing suicide because of the way the news is even passed on to them. Because it's a bad news. So, and there's a way you should break a bad news. If a child is not doing very well, that does not mean that the child is useless. That does not mean the child has failed totally. But the way you should communicate is, it's not that, you are good in some aspects. However, you have some challenges in other aspects. That does not necessarily mean that the child is actually a dullard or a failure. It just shows that, the child has some strength and he also has some weakness, just like any other individual. So it goes a long way, the way the parents bring up the children, the way the teachers also raise the children.
Okay. Now let's look at workplace.
Okay.
Our workplace. Do the bosses at various workplaces contribute to making their staff feel low, feel downgraded, resorting to not being able to, act in the presence of other colleagues?
It's possible in a toxic work environment. And in a toxic work environment whereby the boss tends to look down on every other person in the establishment as if they are nobody, and even when their junior colleagues make mistakes, the way you correct an individual goes a long way in their learning process. If you correct with hatred, if you correct with too much of a higher hand, you are not necessarily passing a good message down to the individual. You're only making the junior staff to feel more scared, more to doubt themselves. But even if you correct with love, if you correct them in a way that doesn't attack their own personality, there's a difference between an individual's personality and the job they do. Comment on the job they do and not on their personality. So in a work setting, a boss needs to be able to understand that thin line between his junior's personality and the work they do. So if you want to correct a junior employee, emphasize on what they did, not their own personality. I've seen some employees come like, oh, my boss insulted me today. I just felt like the ground should open and she enter. I feel like that is workplace abuse. In a normal setting, you could sue your boss for that. So it's very important the way you talk to, and a happy employee makes an happy organization.
Sure.
So it's very possible. That's why I always advise people, when you work in a toxic environment, the first thing you should think first is to run.
Okay. Now, someone says social media can actually make someone have low self-esteem. How true is that?
You know, when we were growing up then, there was not too much of social media. So you learn from your peers within your environment. So if you are from an average home, you tend to live maybe in an average setting. You don't get to see things that your parents can't provide for you.
Sure.
So, but social media now, you might even be living in the remote area and you tend to see things that your parents can't even afford for you, or things that you're unable to achieve. And everybody wants to live a life of, oh, I'm there. So everybody wants to paint a good picture about themselves. So the way social media can actually influence someone is, if you already have a negative core belief about yourself and you see people posting success always, nobody posts their failures online, nobody posts their struggles online, they only post the end product online, which is good. So you feel threatened. An individual might start feeling threatened of saying, oh, am I the only one? Is it that I'm not doing well in life? Is it that I'm not making progress? Whereas you are actually making progress. But because of social media, you've now compared yourself with what you see on social media. Then it now activates your dormant core beliefs that have been lying down for a while, not visible, to be activated. Then you start questioning yourself. Then you see them, oh, because of that, I also want to belong to this clique. That's where fake life now come into place. So because I believe I'm worthless, definitely I must appear to the world that I'm perfect, everything about me is good. So, and that's what I want to post on the social media. However, deep down, you know yourself that you actually had low self-esteem. And the more you do that, you are just you're just like you're sharing virus to other people. Other people will also see and believe that, oh, life is good for you, not knowing the challenges you are going through, and also use that as a yardstick for their own life.
Okay, now, as a psychologist, now, how does genetics affect one's self-esteem?
Okay. To me, I believe genetics play a little role when it comes to one's self-esteem, because it has to do with when you were born. I believe everybody is born with a blank slate that you now get to write on. So after the genetics that your mom or your dad had low self-esteem, doesn't mean that necessarily they transmit the gene to you. What happened is that you learnt it from them. You understand? So that it's not as if it's hereditary. It's a learning process. So you learn it the way they talk to you. You learn it the way they behave to you. You learn it the way they live their whole life. If your father, if someone grows up in a home where the father believes that I can't achieve this, I can't do this, the word no, impossibility is always what he or she hears every day. There's every tendency that he or she also grows up to have that tendency to believe that, oh, this is how life is. So to me, it's more of a learning process that people learn it rather than being inherited.
Okay, now, is self-esteem self-concept?
Okay. So most people always mix these two terms together or mix it up, and it's because they are quite similar. Self-concept is a broader term than self-esteem. Self-concept has to do with how an individual perceives himself, evaluates himself. So, and you can now classify self-concept into 3 other dimensions, which number 1 is the self-image, how you see yourself. What, like if I say, you look at mirror, how do you see yourself? Some people describe themselves in terms of their personality, some will determine themselves in terms of their existence, what they've achieved in terms of achievement. While for the second part is the self-esteem, how you value the self you saw in the mirror. Then the third one is the ideal self, the person you wish to be. So self-concept is like a moral of a broader term than self-esteem.
Okay. All right, if you just joined us, this is Flipside, and we're all looking at self-esteem. Our psychologist here has done much as far as letting us know the difference between high esteem and low self-esteem. Now, when we come back, we'll be having more educational talk as far as this topic is all about. Don't go nowhere. Thank you so much for rejoining us on Flipside. Now, while we were on break, I was actually asking our clinical psychologist here if age can actually, determine one's self-esteem. You either being high self-esteem or low self-esteem.
Okay. Yeah, so the role age plays in self-esteem, it's not as if when you are within the age of maybe 5 to 6, you have a high or you have a low self-esteem. What age does is, it just shows us when it becomes more visible. So it doesn't play a specific role that low self-esteem occurs at a specific age. So right from childhood, the child is still developing his or her personality. So whether he's still learning low self-esteem to come up with a low self-esteem, or he's learning to have a high self-esteem. So it will become more visible when the child's personality has fully formed at the age of less than 18, 19. So at that age, he is already aware of who he is or who she is. He is already aware, or he or she is aware of our core beliefs. So when the individual is now aware of these core beliefs, that's when we can now say, oh, is this core belief positive? Are they negative? If they are negative, then definitely the individual has a very low self-esteem. If it's high, then we'll say, oh, or if it's positive, then we say this individual has a high self-esteem. Okay, now,
apart from parents now, can one actually get these traits from maybe outside the home?
Yes, because we are social human beings, and we learn daily from various people we see. Okay. So you could actually, because most people believe that automatically the parent has to be the role model. Yeah. However, we also have different role models outside, such as people we like, things we admire. So we can even learn to have a very low self-esteem from the screen, from what we watch, what we see, what we listen to. So it's not like just the parents alone. So you can even learn it. You see children say, my teacher said this. And at that point when children start going to school, they tend to even value the opinion of their teachers more than the mother. Say, my teacher said this is how we must do it, and she's correct. So definitely if the teacher is someone who is not well trained and talks down in a negative tone on the students could actually pick it up and start and believe and hold up to those negative core beliefs.
Okay, now, self-confidence. How is self-confidence built?
Okay. You build self-confidence by first identifying that you have a positive core beliefs. Okay. How do I see myself? If I see myself as good, it gives me that assurance that yes, I'm good. I want to do things that make me happy. I want to dress well, that gives me that confidence. I want to achieve things that are good. So first thing first, you need to work on your core beliefs. Have a positive core beliefs about yourself. Once you have a positive core beliefs about yourself, The next thing is to always celebrate. I say celebrate your little wins, no matter how little they are. Because one thing low self-esteem does to individuals is that you don't look at your positive side at all. You only focus on the negative aspects of your life, the areas that are not too pleasant, whereas you forget about the positive side. So if you want to build your self-confidence, you need to, no matter how, jot it down, your little wins, your positive sides. So when you do that, you are filling your positive tank and reducing the negative thoughts pattern about that you have concerning yourself. So after you've built your more positive thoughts, then the next thing is always remind yourself of those positive affirmations about yourself. Remind yourself daily. See, some people, they have their...
They actually have it written down.
Yes.
In the morning when they wake up, say, okay, I am good.
Good.
I am great.
Great.
Yeah.
So what it does is, it might look strange to some people that, no, it's just maybe it doesn't work. What it does is that you are telling yourself, and it gives you confidence of whom you are. Because most times, maybe you are someone who has suffered from low self-esteem, you are trying to regain that confidence. The more you keep telling yourself, the more your brain registers it. So when you tell yourself, when you wake up in the morning, I feel good, today is good, when you are always focusing on the good sides, it gives you that confidence. It allows you to build it. And also, to build yourself confidence, you need to understand that I tell my clients and my patients that mistake is a must. Mistake is a must. So if you've never made mistake in life, something is wrong. So that means if mistake is a must, that means mistake is not a crime. So understand that you will make mistake along the line, and it becomes a problem if you keep repeating the same mistakes. But making a mistake once or twice doesn't mean you failed. So when you have that thought at the back of your mind that, oh, if I make a mistake once, that does not mean I've failed. It builds your self-confidence, because most people believe that, who have low self-esteem, believe that, oh, mistake is not allowed. Whereas it's a fallacy. Mistake, you tend to make mistakes when you do things you've not done before. And what you should do is, if you make mistake, why do I make this mistake? So people who have self-confidence know how to solve problems, because you encounter problem. When you solve a problem, it boosts your ego and it gives you more self-confidence.
Okay, now why do we have people reacting to us other person's comments about them?
Okay, so we all like to hear good things.
Yeah.
As in the individuals, we like to hear good things. We like positive statements about ourselves, because everybody wants something good. So as human, naturally, we want something good. We want to hear good things about ourselves. And also, when we hear negative comments about ourselves, it's normal that we feel not too good about them.
Okay.
That's in human nature.
But you find some persons going to the extreme.
Yes. So you said something bad about me, I didn't like it. That's normal. But because you said something about me, I started crying, I want to kill myself. That shows that there's a problem.
Okay.
That shows that I have low self-esteem, because that means I accept what the individual said about me, even though I am the one that is saying that is true. I'm the one that is saying yes. If he says I'm worthless, I'm not that saying, oh yes, I'm worthless. So I'm now start crying and I start doing things that I should not do on the norm. So that shows that I'm the one that accepts to feel that way. Because let's say in the work setting, the boss just come into a department and just say, all of you are useless. And so a particular staff starts crying. The reason why that staff starts crying is because of the way he or she interprets what the boss said. And another employee might just be smiling. The reason why he or she is also smiling is because of the way he interprets what the boss said. So that shows us that our self-esteem is determined by us, not by what anybody says to you. You determine whether you are going to feel happy about it or feel sad about it.
Okay, now let's look at social circumstances as relates to self-esteem.
Okay. Social circumstances we find ourselves actually also plays a significant role in our self-esteem. For individuals who come from a social circle that is not so economically buoyant, and I find it difficult to get necessary basic amenities of life, might actually find it difficult to have a very high self-esteem if they have negative core beliefs about themselves because of what they grew up to see. So in that environment, but that does not mean that everybody that grew up in that environment, kind of environment, is going to grow up with a negative thought about themselves. That's why you could hear success story of people who rise up from grass to grace. not everybody you chose to actually believe what you see. Although it plays a role because of we interact with these people, we interact in this environment, so it plays a role. So you see people who even come from a very high-to-do family still having low self-esteem because of the expectation of that status. Yeah. And then someone saying, oh, I come from a very educated family. All of us goes to school. So you've written why once, you didn't pass. Then they start asking questions, what's happening? So you might start wondering that, oh, failure has never been accepted
in our family
setting. So I think I'm a worthless individual. So because of that individual has a very low self-esteem. So the social environment plays a role. However, the major ball is in the court of the individual, of saying, will this social role define me or will I define my own self?
Okay. Now, when we talk about encouragement as far as self-esteem is concerned, do we feel when we encourage ourselves, it goes far, or when others tend to stand in the gap and encourages us?
Okay. The two are good. However, you need to encourage yourself first. Okay. If you don't know how to encourage yourself first, you won't know how to receive encouragement from others. So there's what we call self-compassion. That is, you need to be sensitive to your own self. Okay. Sensitive to that, oh, I am experiencing this experience maybe that I'm not even too good. Okay. So you need to be sensitive to yourself and encourage yourself. So when other people encourages you, what you just do is just validate your own opinion about yourself. It validates it. So if you've not learned to encourage yourself, when other people encourage you, you will not know how to accept it. You will say, oh, it's luck, it's nothing. You will even be pointing out to areas you didn't do too well about. So when it comes to encouragement, people should learn to encourage themselves first. Then when others encourage them, they just validate that, encourage the positive affirmations about themselves. So that's it about encouragement.
Okay. Now, what do you have to say about people who like comparing themselves with another? Like, okay, Mr. A did this, and why can't I do it? Or you find another man's wife say, oh, look at your mates. They actually achieve this and you cannot achieve it. Can this actually dampen one's self-esteem?
Yes, to a very large extent. It could actually affect one's self-esteem. Because you are telling them that, oh, they are not good enough. You are telling them that, oh, see, your mate is doing well. So, of course, I like to explain this to my patients because one thing about mental health is that you are not just treating the individual, because the individual is still going back to the society. So you have to find a way of preparing the individual for the society that is going back to. The people who actually make these statements also, they don't necessarily mean harm
to them,
to their loved ones. They say it out of love, but not knowing that the way how we process that information, or other individuals who process that information, goes a long way. If you don't know how to, if you're always comparing someone with someone who is doing well, it's not a crime. However, but do it in a way that it doesn't necessarily affect that person's personality, that it doesn't necessarily affect his own opinion about himself. Say, oh, can't you see your friend? He came first, he came last. You are not a good child. What you've done is you've killed that child. If that child is not resilient, you've killed the child. But if you tell the child, oh, your friend came first, you came last in an exam, you know you could actually put in more effort and do more better. You've not killed the child, you've even given the child that there's hope. Just talked about one of my friends were discussing how Nigerian universities, if you apply for admission and they didn't give you the admission. Some schools will never tell you that the reason why they don't give you the admission. Right? Some schools, if the way they will tell you that they are not giving you the admission might make someone to go and commit suicide. Unlike when you apply to foreign schools, you will see that even if they give you a rejection letter, they'll tell you you are smiling. So what they are doing is that they understand the human behavior. So they're telling you that, oh, even though we are sending you a rejection letter, there's always that room for hope. There's a better time. So that gives you that self-confidence to want to try. But when you just compare to demoralize someone, what you're telling the person is, go and kill yourself. And that's why you see suicide rate is very high in our society now.
Okay, so self-comparison now, comparing oneself to another, is this a negative trait?
I won't totally condemn it.
Okay.
Because the truth is, because everybody strives to be better. You look at, oh, this individual is doing what is great, I also want to do it.
Okay.
But when you not do it in a negative way, that is when you're not easy to question your own self, not knowing that we all have our area of strengths and we have our area of weaknesses.
Yeah.
So you need to understand, if you want to compare yourself, know your strength first. Are you comparing your area of strength or are you comparing your area of weakness? If you are comparing your area of weakness with someone that maybe you are not good with arithmetic, you are good with verbal, and you are not comparing yourself with someone that is good with arithmetic, what is you are saying, oh, because this individual is studying engineering, I must study in engineering.
Yeah.
You will notice that you will be frustrated.
True.
You will not be able to move forward in life. That is one comparison. But if you are comparing yourself, now he's good in verbal, I'm also good in verbal. He has written lots of books. Let me also write books. That is your area of strength. So that comparison brings out the good in you.
Okay. All right. Now, talking about being a psychologist, a clinical psychologist, do we find people come to the hospital often to come evaluate themselves?
In this part of the world, people don't come often until they develop a mental health condition.
Okay.
Maybe they've come up with a personality disorder, or maybe they have a major depressive disorder or post-traumatic stress disorder. So it is doing assessment and diagnosis that you will now find out that, part of the reason why you have these mental conditions because you had a low self-esteem.
Okay.
You understand? However, some enlightened citizens do walk into the hospital, say, I want to do a personality assessment, I want to do a self-esteem assessment, I want to know my self-esteem. Okay. Some organizations also do it for their staffs to say, we want to know the self-esteem, we want to know the self-efficacy of our staffs to know how well they fit into this particular job.
Okay. Now, for you now, what traits will one see in them that will make them say, okay, now I need to go see a psychologist? For someone watching and listening to us right now, what will you say, okay, when you have noticed these and these things, please come see a psychologist?
Okay. So the first thing first, when you notice that you are always thinking about negative things about yourself, when you notice that, oh, I feel like maybe I'm not good enough, when you notice that, oh, I don't feel happy about myself. For let me use the most common people who come for clinic, the female gender, they say that, oh, I'm not satisfied, I don't look beautiful enough, I look ugly, or I have a bulgy eyes, I'm not comfortable with my weight, I'm not comfortable with my height, things that can't change. You know, sometimes I'm not comfortable with my height. I don't know of any surgery that you will do that maybe increase your height or reduce your height. So when you're always thinking in a negative pattern, that's a pointer, that is a signal that, oh, something might be wrong. That is one of the symptoms, symptoms of maybe a serious mental health condition. But because it is part of the world, we've not developed our vocabulary when it comes to mental health. So we don't even know whether it has to do with my self-esteem or not. So we just clarify that that's who I am. So the moment you start noticing that, you feel bad about yourself, about your look, about anything that concerns yourselves, generally, regularly, that's a point that you say, oh, I need to go out to seek a professional help. So the earlier the better. I tell people, when it comes to mental health, the earlier the better. But in most cases, the patient has almost broke down before even coming to the hospital. However, just like physical health checkup, whereby people come into the hospital and say, I want to do my physical health checkup. You can also walk into a mental health facility, hospital, or a private hospital that has a mental health facility and say, oh, I also want to do a mental health checkup. So if you do this regularly, it will be able to identify if you have any underlying symptoms that could predispose you into actually developing low self-esteem or any other major mental health condition.
Okay. Now, is there a solution to low self-esteem?
Yes. There are solutions to low self-esteem. Someone who has low self-esteem can actually come in for psychotherapy. What I mean by psychotherapy is what we call the talk therapy. It's not a medication therapy. So drugs, you won't be given any medication if there's no need for it. But I'm talking about someone who strictly has a low self-esteem. So what the person just needs is psychotherapy, where you come to see a clinical psychologist, does the assessment for you, find out you have a low self-esteem, and depending on the specialty of the clinical psychologist, I'm saying, okay, which therapy works best will work best for these patients, and then apply the therapy for the patients. And the patients will actually feel more better and feel okay at the end of the section.
Okay, now there's this thing they call outside the country, shrink or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do we have them here, and do people usually go to just see one of these persons and say, okay, I have been often experiencing a particular thing. I want you to, give me a talk on signing it.
In this part of the world, I say we do it, but we do it in the wrong way. And this is because of, say, maybe lack of awareness. So we know we have these complaints that they don't necessarily have to do with seeing taking medication or going for surgery, that we just need to talk to someone. And when we do that here in Nigeria, we find that people tend to go to either their religious leaders. Then you see them going to pastors, you see them going to their imams, you also see them going to their traditional homes to talk about these issues. For someone maybe suffering from abuse at home, going to the pastors, or for someone who even have a low self-esteem, going for spiritual counseling. So that is, I think that area is where we Africans tend to utilize more. However, people who are enlightened, people who have actually had the opportunity of maybe because of education, because of exposure, know that there are actually some people who we call clinical psychologists, including some psychiatrists that actually are psychotherapists that specialize in this field. So you see them coming into the clinic. And also, another reason is because of stigma, because most mental health practitioner works predominantly maybe in a psychiatric hospital. You see few in a teaching hospital. So nobody will want to, because of the stigma, even I say self-stigma first, we want to walk into a psychiatric hospital because of maybe I'm just not low self-esteem. I don't have any mental condition. Why should I go into a psychiatric hospital? But people who are enlightened will feel like, no, mental health is important as physical health. So that I have maybe a mild self-esteem doesn't mean that I can't walk into a mental health facility to receive treatment. Okay, now before we let you go, Stephen. For launcher. Yeah, so what are your advice to parents, first of all? Okay, so my advice to parents is, number one, understanding that you need to prepare to be a parent. That's first and foremost, prepare to be a parent. So we do my session, if I'm counseling parents, I ask them, is this pregnancy planned? So we'll tell you, no, we didn't really plan it. Some will tell you that, once a husband and wife marry, they automatically start having children. And that's the normal. I said, no, you need to first prepare your whole self. Because the truth is, when it comes to parenting, we don't have a manual. The manual we have is the one we learn from our parents and from other people we saw. So that might not be the best manual. So you need to first understand what is the best manual. So by being prepared to be a parent. So you need to learn to know that how to talk to a baby, how to talk to a child at different developmental stages. Goes a long way. There's a way you talk to a 3-year-old baby, there's a way you talk to a 7-year-old child. It's different. So you need to learn that first. That's why I talk about parents being prepared to be parents in the first instance. So when you do that, you are prepared. The way you raise your child, if you want to raise a king, talk to that baby like a king. Not, no, he's still a child. No. If you want to raise a doctor, talk to the child like a doctor. So don't talk to them like they don't have a say, because of that is the way you are brought up. And because it turned out well for you. That doesn't mean that is the best way. You could have been more than who you are now if your own parents had that exposure. So I talk to parents that they need to treat their children in a way that does not affect their self-esteem. That's why I see some schools saying we don't beat our children because we believe there are better ways of actually passing knowledge to them and actually correcting their behaviors. So parents need to take their time and watch the way they talk to their children. That goes a long way. The way, and apart from talking, the way they also behave to their domestic staffs at home. Because you might be talking to raising your child like a king, but you talk down on your domestic staff, or you do things that are not too good. They also pick that. They also learn that. Okay. All right. And then lastly, secondly, now for individuals who feel everything about them is just negative, it's just bad. Anything I put my hand always goes wrong. So what advice do you have for them? The advice I would say is that they should seek help now.
All right.
Not later. They should seek help now.
Okay.
Because what that shows is that something is wrong. Something has gone wrong somewhere that needs to be fixed. If that is not fixed, what will happen is that they will set some rules and assumptions about themselves. So if something is always bad, I need to always do this. That can actually limit their growth. For someone who's unemployed, I believe that, oh, I'm not too good at this job. We don't want to go the extra mile to perform well. We just be confined. No promotion, no problem. And other staffs are moving forward.
As far as I'm working
so
and getting my salary.
So even in relationship, that's why you see some breakups, divorce very high.
Okay.
Because there's a problem, fundamental problem that they didn't deal with at the initial stage. So I will ask them to seek help now.
Okay. All right, seek help now before it is certainly too late. Whatever we do, we should try as much as we can to apply caution. And there's a much we can take today on Flipside. It has been self-esteem. Know what is good for you and go all the way out to get yourself better and better at it. I'll be seeing you again next week for another exciting time on Flipside. Do have yourself a blessed day. Bye for now.